Chapter 1. The Arrival. Dust Creek wasn't supposed to exist. Nestled in the high desert between Prescott and Jerome, about 12 miles off the Agua Fria River, it was one of those towns that sprouted up around a played-out silver claim. By 1887, it had a population of 47 souls, one main street, officially called Silverado Avenue, a general store run by the Hutchins family, a saloon named the Brass Spur, a boarding house, and a small church that doubled as the schoolhouse. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were impossible. Until he arrived. September 14th, 1887, a Wednesday. According to the journal of Reverend Thomas Whitmore, a stranger rode into town just before sunset. He came from the south, driving a covered wagon with no markings, pulled by two massive draft horses that looked half-starved. The Reverend noted something peculiar: the horses' eyes. He wrote, "They did not look at anything. They stared through everything, as if they had seen something that broke them." The stranger introduced himself as Silas Cobb, said he was a butcher by trade, looking to settle down after years of travel in the mining camps. He was a big man, over 6.5 feet tall, with hands the size of dinner plates, and a face that the Reverend described as handsome in the way a well-made coffin is handsome. Silas rented the old smokehouse on the eastern edge of town, right next to the dried-up creek bed that gave the town its name. The building had been abandoned for 2 years after its previous owner, a German immigrant named Klaus Brenner, disappeared without a trace. Within a week, Silas had set up shop. He called it Cobb's Quality Meats. The sign he painted was beautiful, professional, the kind of sign you'd see in San Francisco, not a dying desert town. And the meat he sold? People said it was the best they'd ever tasted. Martha Hutchins, who ran the general store with her husband Edward, wrote in a letter to her sister in Prescott, "Mr. Cobb's beef is so tender, so flavorful, that even our toughest cuts seem like butter. Edward jokes that Silas must have a secret supplier because no cattle around here produce meat like that. I told him not to question good fortune." But here's the thing that nobody talked about, not at first. Silas Cobb never bought any cattle, never had any delivered, never went to any of the ranches in the area, and yet his shop was always stocked. Sheriff William Garrett, a former Texas Ranger who'd settled in Dust Creek after a bullet to the hip ended his riding days, he noticed. On September 28th, the sheriff stopped by Cobb's shop just to ask some questions, friendly-like. The sheriff's deputy, a young man named Thomas Birch, waited outside. He later testified that he heard talking, then laughing, then silence. When Sheriff Garrett emerged 20 minutes later, Deputy Birch said the sheriff looked pale as a ghost and wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, Sheriff Garrett got drunk at the Brass Spur for the first time in 5 years. He told the bartender, a man named Samuel Cross, "Some questions are better left unasked." 3 days later, the sheriff was dead. Chapter 2. The First Carving. October 3rd, 1887. Mary Hutchins, age 9, was the one who found Sheriff Garrett. She was walking to school, cutting through the town square like she did every morning, when she saw him, hanging from the big cottonwood tree in the center of the square, the same tree where they'd held the town's 4th of July celebration just 3 months earlier. The girl's screams brought the whole town running. What they found was methodical. Sheriff Garrett had been killed somewhere else, then brought to the square. His body had been drained of blood. Completely drained, the town doctor, Amos Finch, would later note, and then hung by his feet from the tree. But that wasn't the worst part. His torso had been opened, cleanly, professionally, and his organs had been removed and arranged on the ground below him in a pattern. Dr. Finch, who had served as a field surgeon during the Civil War and had seen things that broke most men, said he'd never seen such precise cuts outside of a surgical theater. But it was the face that made people turn away. The smile, carved from ear to ear, so deep it showed teeth and bone, and the eyes. The eyes had been left open, but something had been done to them. They looked aware, like the sheriff was still watching. Pinned to his chest with a butcher's hook, the kind used for hanging meat, was a note written in perfect copperplate script. The meat is always freshest when it knows it's being watched. Thank you for your curiosity, Sheriff. You were delicious. Deputy Birch organized a search party immediately. 15 men, armed with rifles and shotguns, went to Cobb's Quality Meats. The shop was open, the door unlocked. Inside, everything was immaculate. The cutting tables were clean. The tools were organized. The meat in the cold room, kept cool by box of ice that Silas had delivered weekly from Jerome, was neatly arranged and labeled. Beef, pork, venison, all perfectly normal. Except for one thing that Deputy Birch noticed. In the back room, there was a door, a heavy door reinforced with iron bands, with 3 separate locks. When they demanded Silas open it, he smiled, that same pleasant smile he always had, and said, "That's my curing room, gentlemen, where I age my special cuts. The temperature and humidity have to be just right or the meat spoils. I'm afraid I can't open it. It would ruin weeks of work." They had no warrant, no proof, no legal right to force entry. So they left. But Deputy Birch stationed 2 men outside the shop, watching, waiting. That night, both men disappeared. Their rifles were found leaning against the wall of the shop. Their boots were placed neatly side by side. And on the door of Cobb's Quality Meats, written in what looked like grease, were 2 words: "Stop watching." The next morning, Silas Cobb was standing behind his counter, cheerful as ever, offering free samples of his new sausage to anyone who stopped by. Martha Hutchins wrote in her journal, "I am ashamed to admit I tried a piece. God forgive me, it was the best thing I've ever tasted. I went home and cried for an hour, and I don't know why."
Chapter 3. The Feeding. October 7th through October 18th, 1887. 11 days that turned Dust Creek into a graveyard. It started slowly, people going missing, 1 or 2 at a time, always at night, always without a sound. The Hutchins family locked their doors and windows, so did everyone else, but it didn't matter. On October 9th, Edward Hutchins vanished from his own bedroom. His wife, Martha, woke to find his side of the bed empty, the windows still locked from the inside, and a single bloody handprint on the wall above where his head had been. On October 11th, 3 children disappeared from the boarding house. The owner, a widow named Sarah Colton, swore she heard them laughing in the middle of the night, laughing and chewing. On October 13th, Reverend Whitmore decided to confront Silas Cobb directly. He brought his Bible, his faith, and a Derringer pistol hidden in his coat. The Reverend's journal, found later hidden in the church floorboards, describes what happened. I entered his shop at noon, when the sun was highest, thinking that evil things fear the light. What a fool I was. Silas was behind his counter, cutting meat. He looked up at me with those eyes, those terrible empty eyes, and smiled. "Reverend," he said, "I've been expecting you. Would you like to know the truth?" I told him I wanted him to leave, to take his evil and go. He laughed, not a cruel laugh, a genuinely amused laugh. "Reverend," he said, "I'm not the evil here. I'm the consequence. This town has been feeding on itself for years. Greed, lust, envy, wrath. You people have been consuming each other since the day you arrived. I'm just making it literal." He gestured to his shop, to the meat hanging on hooks. "Do you want to know what you've really been eating? Do you want to know why it tastes so good? Why you keep coming back?" I raised my pistol. My hand was shaking. He didn't move. He just smiled that carved smile. And that's when I realized. His face. The smile wasn't carved into him. It was his real smile. Too wide, too many teeth. You can't kill what was never alive, Reverend. You can't stop what you've already invited in. Every time you took a bite, every time you came back for more, every time you ignored what you knew in your heart was wrong, you fed me. You made me strong.
I fired 3 times, center mass. The bullets went through him like he was smoke. He tilted his head like a curious dog. "Run, Reverend. Tell them what's coming. Tell them that the feast is almost ready and everyone is invited." I ran. God forgive me, I ran. That was the last entry in Reverend Whitmore's journal. By October 18th, 32 people were missing. The remaining 15 barricaded themselves in the church. Deputy Birch sent a rider to Prescott, begging for help from the territorial marshal. That night, they heard singing. A man's voice, deep and beautiful, singing an old hymn, "Come, ye sinners, poor and needy." It was coming from Cobb's Quality Meats, and underneath the singing, they heard other sounds, wet sounds, chewing sounds, and laughter. So much laughter.
Chapter 4. The Revelation. October 22nd, 1887. Territorial Marshal James Holloway arrived in Dust Creek with 6 armed deputies. What he found was documented in his official report filed with the Arizona Territorial Government on November 3, 1887. The report was classified and sealed for 75 years. I found a copy in the Yavapai County Archives. Marshal Holloway wrote, "We arrived at approximately 2 p.m. The town appeared deserted. No smoke from chimneys, no animals, no sound. We proceeded down Main Street, Silverado Avenue, and observed that every building had been marked. The word hungry painted in what appeared to be blood. We found the church barricaded. Inside, we discovered 15 bodies, men, women, and 3 children. They had not been killed. They had starved to death. The church had been barricaded from the outside. But that's not the worst part. They had been eating each other. The evidence was undeniable. The bodies showed signs of cannibalism, bite marks, missing flesh, and in the corner we found a pile of bones, human bones, picked clean. On the altar we found a note, "See, you didn't need me at all. You were always hungry." We proceeded to the establishment known as Cobb's Quality Meats. The door was open. Inside, God help me, I don't have words.
The shop was full of meat, hanging from hooks, laid out on tables, stored in the cooled room, all of it labeled, all of it organized. But it wasn't beef. It wasn't pork. We found clothing, personal effects, a badge, Sheriff Garrett's badge, embedded in a cut of meat labeled Premium Sirloin. In the back, we found the locked door. We broke it down. The room beyond was a larder, a human larder. Bodies in various states of preparation. Some hanging, some on tables, some in barrels of brine. And on the wall, written in blood, was a message. "Thank you for the feast. I'll be back when you're hungry again." We found no sign of Silas Cobb. We burned the building to the ground. We burned the whole town. I am recommending that Dust Creek be stricken from all territorial maps and records. Let the desert take it. Let it be forgotten. But here's what Marshal Holloway didn't include in his official report. His personal journal, donated to the Arizona Historical Society by his granddaughter in 1954, contains one additional entry.
We found something else in that room. A book, handwritten, a ledger. It contained names, hundreds of names, towns I'd never heard of, dates going back to 1823, and at the end, a list of future towns, future dates. One of them was Prescott, 1889. Another was Tombstone, 18
91. I burned the book. I told no one. But I remember the last page. It said, "The hunger never dies. It just moves. It just waits. And when you're ready, when you're so hungry that you'll eat anything, believe anything, become anything, I'll be there. With my knives, with my hooks, with my smile. I am the butcher. I am the feast. I am what you become when you forget that you're human." God save us all. Marshall Holloway died in 1889 in Prescott. He was found in his home, dead from apparent starvation, despite the fact that his pantry was full and his mouth was full of meat.
Chapter 5. The Silence. Today, there is no Dust Creek, Arizona. If you look at modern maps, at GPS coordinates, at satellite imagery, you'll find nothing. Just empty desert between Prescott and Jerome. But if you talk to the old-timers in Yavapai County, if you buy them enough drinks and ask the right questions, they'll tell you stories about a place that used to exist, about a butcher who came and went like a bad dream, about people who disappeared and the ones who stayed behind and did unforgivable things. In 1923, a group of hikers claimed they found ruins in the desert, old buildings, a church, a main street. They said every building had the same word painted on it, still visible after 36 years. Hungry. They said they found a shop, a butcher's shop, with a sign that read, "Cobb's Quality Meats." They said the door was open. They said there was meat inside, fresh meat, still hanging on hooks. They didn't stay long enough to read the labels. In 1967, a documentary crew tried to find the location. They had Marshall Holloway's coordinates. They had historical records. They had everything they needed. They found nothing. But their camera operator, a man named Richard Voss, said something in an interview years later that never made it into the final cut. "We didn't find the town, but on our last night in the desert, I woke up around 3 a.m. I heard singing, a man's voice, deep and beautiful, singing a hymn, and underneath it, chewing sounds, like someone eating, like a lot of someone's eating. I looked out of my tent, and in the distance I saw lights, building lights, a whole town lit up like it was 1887. And I saw a man, a tall man, standing in the middle of the street, looking right at me. He smiled, that smile, too wide, too many teeth. And then everything went dark. When the sun came up, there was nothing there, just desert. But I found something in my tent, a piece of paper. It said,
The feast never ends. It just waits for the next course. Richard Voss never went back to Arizona. Neither did the rest of the crew. The question isn't whether Dust Creek existed. The records prove it did. The question is, does it still exist? And if you're hungry enough, will you find it?
Epilogue. The Invitation. 3 weeks ago, I received a package. No return address. Postmarked from Prescott, Arizona. Inside was a photograph. Old, sepia-toned, dated 1887. It showed a town square, a cottonwood tree, and a man standing in front of a shop. The sign above the shop read, "Cobb's Quality Meats." The man was tall, handsome, smiling. On the back of the photograph, in perfect copperplate script, was a message. "Thank you for remembering. Thank you for telling the story. Thank you for making them hungry again. I'll be seeing you soon. I haven't been able to eat meat since. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Last week, a new butcher shop opened in Prescott. Beautiful sign. Professional, the kind you'd see in a big city. The owner's name is Silas Cobb, and people say his meat is the best they've ever tasted. This has been Mysteries of the Old West. Some stories don't end, they just wait.